The people are in mourning for the death of the previous king, and now a young man of only 16 years old, named Uzziah, is brought to the throne. At first glance, having such a young king could raise suspicion among the advisors and the elders of the court. However, from the very beginning, it became clear there was something different about Uzziah, an unmistakable sparkle in his eyes and firm conviction in his heart. He did not rely solely on his youth or on his royal status. From an early age, Uzziah showed a deep devotion to God. It was common to see him, still a teenager, seeking wisdom in conversations with priests and devout elders who were interested in guiding the nation in God's ways. When he spoke with these men, his eyes filled with determination, and his questions revealed a genuine thirst for understanding the scriptures and knowing God's will. In the court, there were counselors with political and military experience, and also religious leaders like the prophet Zechariah, not to be confused with the prophet of the homonymous book, but a man who, according to tradition, had a clear vision of God's matters. Zechariah saw in Uzziah the potential to be a king according to God's heart. Therefore, he taught Uzziah to keep his eyes always on what the Lord desired for the kingdom. Uzziah listened attentively, took notes on small clay tablets or on scrolls, according to the technology of the time, and sought to incorporate each lesson into his first royal decisions. In the initial months of his reign, the young king faced the challenge of maintaining order and stability in Judah, especially after the difficulties left by the previous administration. Instead of becoming proud because of his newly received throne, Uzziah endeavored to learn about the people's real needs. He listened to farmers' reports about the harvest, asked merchants about the flow of goods, and met with generals to understand how to strengthen defenses against enemies lurking along the borders. Everything was done with a spirit of humility and dependence on God, for he believed that if guidance came from the Lord, success was certain. When disputes arose between families or tribes, Uzziah made a point of hearing every side before passing judgment. He called in counselors and even village chiefs for an honest and open conversation. With patience, he analyzed each situation, prayed for discernment, and sought above all to act with justice. This sense of responsibility impressed even the oldest nobles, who remembered past kings that preferred impulsive judgments or allowed themselves to be swayed by bribes. Uzziah's devotion was not merely internal. He made sure to show his commitment to God by reinforcing reverence in the temple in Jerusalem. Respecting the priests and their sacred duties, he encouraged the people to attend celebrations and to make offerings with gratitude. He often delivered speeches in which he attributed to the God of Israel the victories and prosperity that were gradually emerging in the kingdom. Everything he did, he credited to the Lord's goodness and mercy. This posture of honoring God and valuing worship practices created an atmosphere of spiritual unity in Judah. Seeing their new king acknowledge divine sovereignty, the people felt inspired to follow his example. It was as if, together, they were building not only a militarily and economically strong nation, but also one that was spiritually solid. It was not easy to govern a kingdom that was still recovering from previous conflicts. Neighboring tribes saw in Uzziah's young age an opportunity to attack Judah and plunder it. However, he was not intimidated. Whenever a problem arose, instead of rushing in blindly, Uzziah sought advice from his generals, from the wise men, and, of course, consulted God in prayer. When he finally decided how to proceed, he did so with confidence, believing in the protection and guidance of the Most High. Little by little, Uzziah's fame began to spread through neighboring regions. Reports said, "In Jerusalem, there is a young king who rules with justice and reverence for God." Such testimonies helped the nation regain respect from other peoples. Merchants traveled to Judah without fear of being robbed, as they knew Uzziah was strict about injustice. The fields thrived, and the people worked with enthusiasm, believing their king encouraged God's blessings upon the land. It was in this environment of sincere devotion, courage, and zeal for the divine commandments that Uzziah laid the foundations of his reign. He did not depend solely on human strategies or political alliances. His greatest alliance was with God himself. Everything he did aimed to honor the one who had entrusted him with such great responsibility. During this first phase of his reign, Uzziah managed to unite the people around faith in God and a shared objective: to rebuild and strengthen the kingdom. He left behind marks of hope, justice, and trust. His actions demonstrated that when a leader puts God's will first, the entire nation benefits. This promising beginning was like a seed planted in fertile soil. As long as he kept his heart humble and obedient to the Lord, nothing could stop the prosperity that was drawing near. This is how Uzziah began his story: a young man with a heart devoted to God, eager to rule with wisdom, committed to seeking divine guidance, and determined to practice justice for the good of all his people. If you are feeling motivated and inspired by this content, check if you are already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this. We will bring a series of biblical teachings and inspiring stories that motivate us to keep going, stories that do not let us give up. Let us continue the story. Under Uzziah's inspired leadership, the kingdom experienced times of intense victories and significant territorial expansion. Picture a scene where the walls of Jerusalem stood towering, while the armies prepared to defend the nation and conquer new lands. Uzziah, with his courage and unwavering faith, transformed each battle into an opportunity to strengthen not only the borders of his kingdom but also the hope and security of his people. Even before marching into battle, Uzziah showed his military wisdom by reorganizing and training his soldiers. He understood that victory comes not only from physical strength but also from strategy and discipline. With experienced military advisors at his side, the king implemented innovative tactics and rigorous training, enabling his warriors to face any enemy. Each soldier knew that his mission was to protect the homeland and honor God, and this spirit of unity and courage echoed in every command the king issued. Aware that the kingdom's security depended on its walls and defenses, Uzziah invested heavily in fortifications. He ordered the construction and reinforcement of watchtowers and walls along the borders, ensuring that every strategic point was protected. Picture the workers, with simple tools and determination, stacking stones that would become shields against possible invasions. This dedication not only deterred enemies but also sent a clear message: Jerusalem was a blessed, secure, and impenetrable place. With each new campaign, King Uzziah demonstrated his faith and leadership. On various occasions, he led his army against peoples who threatened the peace and prosperity of the kingdom. The battles, fought with precision and bravery, were marked by decisive moments where Uzziah's strategy surpassed the brute force of adversaries. In one of these campaigns, he faced an enemy army that confidently believed it could invade Judah's territory. Surprised by the Uzziah-led troops' cunning, the enemy was defeated quickly and efficiently. Every victory was celebrated not only as a military triumph but also as evidence of the divine favor that accompanied the king. Uzziah's military successes opened the door for the kingdom's expansion. Territories once threatened or dominated by enemies became part of Judah's borders. This acquisition of land did not merely mean an increase in the kingdom's physical space, but also brought new peoples and cultures under the fair protection and administration of the king. With the expansion came new opportunities for commerce and cultural exchange, boosting the kingdom's economy and raising the standard of living of its inhabitants. Roads were improved, markets thrived, and peace prevailed where uncertainty once reigned. Each victory and conquest strengthened Uzziah's image as a provident leader, blessed by God. The king not only secured his people's safety but also consolidated his power and prestige among neighboring nations. Messengers returning from the campaigns carried reports of a fearless king who wielded both the sword and his faith with equal skill. Such prestige drew allies closer and made enemies think twice before daring to challenge Jerusalem. Uzziah's influence extended not just to the conquered territories but also through the respect and admiration he inspired in everyone. Uzziah's victorious campaigns left a lasting legacy in the kingdom's history. Each battle was not merely a military win but a living testimony to the importance of acting with courage, strategy, and faith. The conquered lands became cradles of prosperity and growth, where the people could live in peace and strive for a better future. Above all, these conquests reminded everyone that true strength comes from trusting divine power combined with human determination. Under Uzziah's leadership, the kingdom not only enlarged its borders but also reinforced its bond with God and its people, ushering in an era of growth, security, and prosperity that echoed across the centuries. This vivid narrative shows how the union of strategy, bravery, and faith can turn challenges into triumphs, inspiring generations to always seek justice and divine protection. While Uzziah stood out for his military victories, he never forgot that the true prosperity of a kingdom also depends on the well-being of its people and the progress within. Amid the successes on the battlefield, the king dedicated energy and wisdom to transforming the country's infrastructure, raising living standards and strengthening the economy. Picture roads that were once riddled with holes and dust, now revitalized by public works that made travel safer and more efficient, connecting villages and cities. Uzziah ordered the construction of new squares and marketplaces where citizens could gather, trade goods and ideas, and celebrate national festivities. Under his leadership, water channels were dug to irrigate the land, promoting agriculture and ensuring bountiful harvests even in drier seasons. Bridges were reinforced and expanded, linking distant regions, allowing travelers and merchants to move about safely. This network of improvements not only modernized the kingdom but also created a fertile environment for cultural and economic flourishing. Aware that the land was a precious gift from God, Uzziah encouraged farmers to adopt new farming techniques. He promoted the use of improved tools and irrigation methods that boosted crop yields. Fields that had once been merely vast stretches of land were transformed into vibrant gardens where wheat, barley, and other grains thrived, ready to feed the nation. This renewed agricultural activity brought not only an abundance of food but also the opportunity for each family to reap the rewards of their labor, strengthening the community spirit and self-reliance. King Uzziah understood that commerce was a bridge to prosperity. Thus, he encouraged the organization of fairs and markets that became gathering places for merchants from different regions. These events stimulated the economy and promoted cultural exchange and mutual learning among peoples. Commercial practices improved through the establishment of fair regulations that protected both buyers and sellers, ensuring that every transaction was honest and beneficial for everyone. Hence, Uzziah's kingdom became a vibrant commercial hub, where ethics and transparency were valued. More than just physical works, Uzziah's initiatives had a strong social component. The king believed that a well-structured and informed people formed the foundation of a strong nation. He supported the creation of schools and learning centers where young people could study traditions, the people's history, and especially divine teachings. These institutions helped shape conscious citizens committed to the kingdom's future, fostering a virtuous cycle of knowledge and progress. Each project and initiative promoted by Uzziah reflected his vision of a modern and prosperous kingdom, where faith and development walked hand in hand. He did not seek merely territorial expansion or victory over enemies, but above all, the internal strengthening of society. By investing in infrastructure, agriculture, and commerce, he demonstrated that a ruler's true greatness lies in transforming the lives of his people, creating a safe, just, and thriving environment for everyone. All these innovations and internal development promoted by Uzziah were key to consolidating the kingdom's power and improving the quality of life of its citizens. Each road built, each field properly irrigated, and every organized marketplace served as a testament to the king's commitment to the welfare and prosperity of his nation, leaving a legacy that would endure and inspire future generations to pursue progress with faith and justice. Over the years, Uzziah's reign shone intensely, like the sun at its zenith. Picture a king who, at first, walked humbly and knelt in prayer but who, over time, found himself enveloped by an aura of conquests and applause. Each victory, each public work, and each new alliance secured led the people to hail him and lifted his spirit to heights he had never imagined. Uzziah, once an example of modesty and faith, began to lose himself amid the laurels of glory. In those days, the palace halls echoed with songs and hymns of praise, and accolades came from every corner of the kingdom. People would say, "Our king is blessed by God, for his hands work miracles in the land." This adulation, initially seen as a sign of divine favor, gradually filled Uzziah's heart with a confidence bordering on arrogance. He started to look at his past achievements and take pride in his own abilities, gradually forgetting the guidance that once led him humbly. As the brightness of his achievements intensified, Uzziah began to feel victory was in his grasp, believing success stemmed solely from his own strategy and strength. In meetings with his advisors and, especially, with spiritual leaders, the king listened to the words of wisdom that had always guided him. Yet, over time, he began to disregard them. Any advice about restraint or humility was overshadowed by the echo of his triumphs. The king, who had once knelt in prayer, now walked with the certainty that nothing could shake his grand destiny. Within the palace, mirrors along the corridors reflected not only the image of the king but also his vision of an invincible rule. Uzziah felt that every decision was infallible, that every plan drawn up was a divine guarantee of prosperity, and that his own will stood above even sacred precepts. Though initially spellbinding, this personal exaltation planted a dangerous seed of pride. His gestures, once marked by caution and reverence, were now dominated by an unrestrained confidence, and the king began to believe his glory was inherent and permanent. As pride grew in his heart, Uzziah slowly drifted away from the closeness with God that had once defined him. Mornings, previously dedicated to meditation and prayer, turned into moments in which the king merely celebrated his conquests with his court. Each military success and each public project completed reminded him of how grand he had become. However, this distance came at a steep price. The divine wisdom that had always guided him lost its space in his heart, leaving a void that pride could not fill. This subtle yet dangerous shift did not go unnoticed by the priests and prophets who served in the temple. They saw his once radiant deeds becoming distorted by vanity, and they worried about what fate might hold for a king drifting away from truth and humility. Pride, like a dark cloud, began to overshadow the radiant sun of his faith, heralding days when divine judgment would surely be felt. Thus, Uzziah's peak of glory, which once illuminated his reign and filled the people with hope, also revealed the perils of self-sufficiency and unchecked pride. Each achievement was a reminder that success is not merely a product of human effort but of partnership with the divine, which constantly requires humility. This transformation in the king's heart became a lesson for all. Even the greatest leaders must never allow glory to turn into pride, for without God's guidance and grace, even the mightiest king can be lost. Hence, the peak of Uzziah's glory and his mounting pride during moments of triumph marked the beginning of a series of profound changes, where each victory carried the subtle risk of diverting his gaze from what truly mattered: constant dependence on and reverence for the God who had always sustained him. At the height of the pride taking over Uzziah's heart, a fateful day arrived, one that would irreversibly mark his path. Picture the temple in Jerusalem, a sacred and imposing place where every stone and carving spoke of the faith and obedience to God. This space was reserved for the priests, those chosen to serve the Lord and to preserve the purity of divine rites. However, blinded by the misleading sparkle of arrogance, Uzziah committed an act that could not be pardoned. One day, as he walked through the palace corridors, Uzziah felt an unrestrained confidence surge within him. The king, who until then had been an example of courage and leadership, started believing his glory and power gave him the right to do anything, including defying God's sacred commands. Driven by this sense of invincibility, he made a rash decision: to invade the holy area of the temple. It was a decision that not only went against tradition but directly disrespected the divine order established for those serving at the altar. Upon entering the sacred space of the temple, Uzziah made no secret of his intention. With determined strides and a look blending pride and scorn, he went to the place reserved exclusively for priests to perform rituals, such as the burning of incense. This incense, seen as an offering of pure worship to God, symbolized the communion between man and the divine. By taking on this exclusive role, the king was not merely breaking a rule. He was challenging the very essence of reverence and order that underpinned the people's relationship with the Lord. Suddenly, the sound of his footsteps echoed through the temple corridors, and whispers of disbelief spread quickly. Priests and elders, who had devoted their lives to guarding the sacred commandments, were astonished to see the king, supposed to be the first to uphold the fear of the Lord, openly flouting God's instructions. The air, usually filled with reverent silence and prayers, now crackled with tension and a foreboding sense that something dire was about to happen. In that moment, Uzziah's action epitomized the pinnacle of pride quietly growing in his heart. Every victory, every conquest, and every accolade he had received fueled his arrogance. In his mind, he believed his hand was so blessed that he could act without the proper reverence. But by entering the holy space and assuming a role that was not his, Uzziah directly challenged God's directives, which clearly stated, only the appointed priests could burn incense, as this required the purity and separation vital to preserving the temple's holiness. Uzziah's irreverent act did not go unnoticed. There, within the sacred walls, the king demonstrated, without uttering a word, that his heart had hardened. His disregard for the sacred was not merely an infraction of a rule. It was a break in the covenant of humility and submission that should guide Israel's leadership. This transgression marked a point of no return, symbolizing the loss of the ability to distinguish between the holy and the profane. Uzziah's misdeed in the temple would echo through the ages as a powerful warning about the danger of unbridled pride. His act, laden with disobedience and irreverence, stands as a timeless lesson. Even the mightiest leaders must keep their hearts humble and obedient to God's laws. Each stone of the temple, every sacred ritual, and each priestly teaching carried the memory of that day, serving as a reminder to future generations never to be deceived by the deceptive glow of pride. Therefore, Uzziah's transgression in the temple was not merely an isolated error, but the climax of a journey marked by success and, consequently, by arrogance. It was the moment in which the king, blinded by his own achievements, forgot that true greatness lies in submission to God's will, not in the exaltation of one's own ego. This tragic episode turned his story into an eternal warning about how perilous it is to stray from the sacred precepts, even if you occupy the highest seat of power. Do you feel any similarity between the moment you are living and the story just told? Do you feel you are going through something similar? Tell us how you feel. If you need prayer or help, share a story of overcoming obstacles to inspire us and give us strength to persevere. Share if you want to help someone or if you need help. In a moment that seemed to freeze time, the reign once marked by glory and achievements took a dramatic turn. Uzziah's disobedience in the temple, that deed that flouted holy precepts, brought an immediate and crushing response from God. It was as if the heavens opened, and divine justice descended upon the king with the force of thunder, proving that no one, not even a blessed ruler, can ignore the Lord's commandments. On that ill-fated day, while the air still vibrated from his act of defiance, something began to happen to Uzziah. A chill ran over his skin, and a sense of discomfort spread through his body, as if nature itself were reacting to his transgression. It was the beginning of a curse that would manifest as leprosy, a terrible and deeply stigmatizing disease. At that time, leprosy was seen not only as a physical ailment but also as a divine sign of separation and punishment. As days went by, the first symptoms of the curse became impossible to ignore. Small spots appeared on Uzziah's skin, as if the earth itself were reclaiming the purity he had desecrated. Initially, these spots were treated with the hope that they were merely a passing illness, but soon it became clear that the disease was spreading inexorably. The king, once powerful and full of vigor, saw his health deteriorate, along with his capacity to govern actively. Leprosy affected not just Uzziah's body but also his standing among the people. In those days, the diseased were isolated to protect the community and to serve as a visible example of divine punishment. Thus, the king was removed from state affairs and confined to an involuntary exile within his own palace walls. This physical separation symbolized an even more potent reality. The glow of his authority and the warmth of his presence were replaced by shadows of isolation and sorrow. Every glance of pity or fear that came his way reminded all that even the mightiest leaders are not immune to God's judgment. Uzziah's leprosy served as a silent but deafening reminder of the importance of maintaining a humble heart before God. This punishment was not a mere physical infliction but a lesson that reverberated through the ages. No human being, regardless of how great his power or how many victories he has achieved, can exalt himself above the Lord's will. Pride, when unchecked, can transform a blessed leader into an emblem of downfall and disgrace. With the curse, Uzziah's active rule came to an end. His isolation grew deeper, and the court, once filled with jubilation over his triumphs, looked on with sorrow at the king who, through a single act of disobedience, lost everything he had built. Beyond ending his reign, the curse of leprosy became an eternal sign of the price of arrogance and the significance of humility. Each generation that heard Uzziah's story would remember that power must always be paired with reverence to divine laws and with the continuous pursuit of God's guidance. Thus, Uzziah's punishment, manifested as leprosy, not only removed him from his role as ruler but also etched a profound lesson about the need for unwavering reverence for the Most High. Amid pain and isolation, Uzziah's story resonates as a potent warning. True greatness is not found in self-exaltation, but in humility before the one who made all things. After the terrible curse that befell Uzziah, the reign once known for strength and glory began to show signs of weakening. Leprosy, spreading relentlessly across the king's body, not only undermined his health but also drove him away from his leadership role and from actively interacting with his people. Picture a throne that once pulsed with the energy of a vibrant king, now empty, because the man who once sat upon it was forced into seclusion, distanced from all his duties and responsibilities. The temple, which was the spiritual heart of the kingdom, took on an atmosphere of profound sadness. Uzziah, who once walked among the priests with humility, was now barred from any participation in holy rituals. This exclusion became a powerful symbol of the loss of God's favor. The king, who once embodied the Lord's protection and guidance, now lived on the fringes of what he himself had helped to establish. Following established laws, the priests could not allow someone so marked by disobedience to remain among them. Hence, the sacred sanctuary became a place of mourning and reflection on the consequences of pride. As Uzziah's condition worsened, it became clear that he could no longer fully perform his kingly duties. The decisions he once made with confidence and wisdom now fell to others, and power began to slip away from the man who had once achieved so much. Confronted by this harsh reality, his son, endowed with a more modest attitude and attentive to past lessons, was called upon to take on the royal functions. This move not only saved the kingdom from possible collapse but also reminded everyone that the well-being of the people must supersede personal pride. Isolated in his own palace, Uzziah spent his days away from the citizens who once praised him. Doors that once opened for the king now remained closed, and the castle corridors, once echoing with debates and decisions, were quiet in his absence. This exile, both physical and symbolic, was a painful reminder that even the mightiest leaders cannot escape the consequences of straying from God's ways. Every day spent in solitude became a living lesson and a warning that greatness without humility can lead to downfall. Uzziah's decline and withdrawal from power, evident in his distancing from responsibilities and the throne gradually passing to his son, echoed as a cautionary tale for the ages. The king's story, which began so promisingly and fervently, became a narrative of how destructive arrogance and disobedience can be. While his son displayed the ability to guide the people with a renewed mind and a humbler heart, the image of Uzziah, isolated and afflicted by leprosy, stood as a living symbol of how glory can turn into ruin when one strays from the Lord's path. The withdrawal and decline of Uzziah's power teach us that true leadership demands, above all, obedience and reverence to God. His history is a stark reminder that even the most remarkable among us can fall prey to pride and pay a heavy price for doing so. Uzziah's exile, from both his duties and his people, serves as an eternal lesson for leaders and followers alike. Authority and power must always be paired with humility, for genuine greatness lies in loyalty and fear of the Lord. Hence, as his son took up the mantle of leadership, Uzziah's legacy became a living testimony that turning away from God's path corrodes the soul and diminishes earthly power, ushering in a downfall that warns future generations. Imagine, for a moment, the entire story of Uzziah unfolding before our eyes. The promising beginning of a 16-year-old king, filled with humility and eager to follow God's ways. His remarkable victories on the battlefield, which brought security and prosperity to the people. The investments in public works that fueled internal development in the kingdom. and, finally, his dreadful downfall caused by the seed of pride growing in his heart. This saga, filled with striking ups and downs, leaves a legacy that still resonates today. Uzziah's account is a stark reminder that success can easily become a trap when a leader exalts himself above all else. In his case, pride led him to commit a grave act of disobedience in the temple, where he violated functions intended only for priests. The king who had once been a model of devotion and trust in God ended up isolated in his own palace, unable to rule due to leprosy. This dramatic contrast shows how arrogance can topple even those who have received immense talents and blessings. Uzziah's story also reveals how quickly honor and recognition can vanish when one departs from divine precepts. A ruler who began so well, achieving significant military victories and fostering internal advancements, saw it all undone as his ego replaced God's rightful place in his life. His accomplishments, once celebrated, were overshadowed by his reckless decision to burn incense in the temple, violating sacred law. This highlights how a single rash decision, fueled by pride, can endanger a lifetime of achievement. Central to this narrative is the need to remain humble, regardless of how great our successes may be. When Uzziah was young, he earnestly sought God's guidance and ruled with justice. Yet in the pinnacle of his glory, he believed his strength and achievements were sufficient to guide him. This is precisely where humility should step in as a safeguard, reminding us that we are not self-sufficient. Uzziah's life teaches us that humility does not diminish anyone's greatness. On the contrary, it upholds and protects achievements so they endure securely. Another crucial lesson is to acknowledge that each of us has limits. Uzziah, at some point, forgot that his authority was confined by obedience to God's laws. Failing to recognize that boundary led him to breach a role not given to him, stepping into the temple to burn incense. Likewise, we need to discern our boundaries, what lies within our realm of responsibility and what belongs to God or others. Respecting these limits spares us from irreparable mistakes, like those made by the king who lost not only his health but also his right to remain on the throne. Uzziah's journey also shows that, even during success, we must continually seek God's guidance. Often, when things go well, we are tempted to let our guard down, believing we have all the answers. However, the Bible shows us that depending on God is not a temporary choice but a way of life that protects the heart from the trap of pride. While Uzziah stayed close to the Lord, his reign prospered. Once he pulled away, everything began to crumble. His story speaks to each of us personally. We all possess, to some degree, talents and opportunities that can lead to success. But if we allow pride to take over, we risk seeing our blessings turn into a cause for our downfall. The closing words about Uzziah, in 2 Chronicles chapter 26, ring out as a warning that transcends centuries. He was buried in a separate field, for he was a leper. This detail describes not only his physical state but also the social and spiritual isolation that pride and disobedience bring. Beyond the buildings he erected, the borders he expanded, or the victories he won, Uzziah is chiefly remembered for the lesson he left. Through his downfall, the people of Judah learned that there is no blessing or power that justifies dishonoring God. His life serves as a daily invitation to reflect: are we remembering the source of our victories? Are we staying true to the values that brought us prosperity? For those who came after him, Uzziah's testimony offered the chance to avoid repeating the same mistakes. Ultimately, Uzziah's story is a clear answer to the dangers of excessive pride. He, who seemed destined to end his days in honor and esteem, became marked by a disobedience that cost him his health, his position, and his connection with the people he once loved. Yet paradoxically, his downfall acts as a beacon illuminating the path for all who wish to avert that same fate. If we keep a humble heart, recognizing our strength comes from the Lord, we can enjoy blessings without succumbing to the same error. After all, Uzziah's trajectory leaves no doubt. Every success risks turning into defeat when we lose sight of God's sovereignty. Give this video a like if you are enjoying it, so that YouTube continues recommending content like this and to motivate us to keep going. We appreciate every second, and may God bless you. Uzziah's story, as presented to us, is more than a simple Old Testament account. It is a genuine mirror reflecting both the best and the worst within the human heart. From his humble youth, when he showed sincere devotion and earnestly sought God's guidance, to his era of conquests and public works that filled Jerusalem with hope, and finally to the moment when pride overtook his heart and led to a fatal act of disobedience, this entire arc teaches us about our frailty before the grandeur of the divine. One key point is the transformation wrought by pride. It blinds, isolates, and distances even those once close to God. Uzziah, in his early days, displayed genuine zeal, listened to wise counsel, and acted according to divine directions. However, his many victories and the people's adulation made him begin to see himself as infallible. This progression is subtle and can happen to anyone who ignores the need to keep a humble heart. When the ego assumes the place belonging only to God, the result can only be downfall. Another striking aspect of Uzziah's account is to see that the very successes that brought prosperity also sparked his ruin. This happens when we forget that all gifts come from the Lord, not from ourselves. Uzziah stopped acknowledging that his ability to lead, conquer territories, and promote the kingdom's development flowed directly from God's blessing. In our modern lives, we can fall into the same trap by thinking our achievements in work, family, or any other area stem solely from our own efforts. Therefore, it is crucial to remain grateful and mindful that we are mere stewards of divine blessings, never their owners. Uzziah's transgression in the temple vividly shows that each person has a specific calling and that not everything is permissible for us. He crossed a divinely set boundary by trying to perform tasks meant for priests, thus encroaching on a realm reserved for others. Likewise, today we must discern where we can go, what lies within our competence, and what is meant for someone else or belongs to God. Such respect preserves balance in both relationships and the exercise of authority. The episode of Uzziah's leprosy and his removal from royal functions resonates on a deep level, illustrating how sin, or disobedience, causes isolation. It is not only a physical consequence but also a break in communion that affects the individual's entire existence. It shows that when we let pride outgrow our reverence for God, something precious breaks inside us. The king, who was meant to lead and inspire his people, was left isolated and ill, not just in body but in spirit. In light of these reflections, it is vital to remember that the key to avoiding a similar downfall is vigilance. We must cultivate a teachable heart, never believing ourselves so self-sufficient as to dismiss divine counsel or the guidance of wise leaders and friends. Had Uzziah listened to the priests who tried to warn him in the temple, his story might have taken a different turn. For us, the message is clear: do not let pride take root. Stay tuned to God's voice, revisit His promises, and remember His commandments, for they act as a lighthouse guiding us away from the perils of success. Although Uzziah's story ends on a sorrowful note, it still offers a glimpse of hope. Why? Because each time we revisit this example and learn from it, we give God the opportunity to work in our hearts and correct us beforehand. We are not destined to repeat the same errors. If we acknowledge our weaknesses and submit our victories and projects to the Lord, He is mighty to keep us standing, free from the snares of pride and presumption. Finally, the greatest motivation we can draw from this story is that each day we must strive to be our best while never forgetting the true source of all grace and strength. If we have achieved anything, if we have reached a certain position, if we possess talents and abilities, let us surrender them to God and for the common good. It is in this posture of service, humility, and reverence that we find genuine fulfillment. Uzziah's life shows us that, once humility is lost, even the greatest glories crumble like dust. Yet when we preserve the understanding of our dependence on God, we can walk firmly, unafraid of stumbling over pride. Wherever your journey takes you, remember that Uzziah's story does not need to repeat itself in your life. The secret to avoiding the fall is to keep your heart fully turned to the Lord, recognizing Him in all your ways. If you remain humble, seek God in your important decisions, and respect the boundaries He has set, surely your achievements will be enduring, and your legacy will bring blessing instead of shame. Thus, the central lesson from Uzziah's life is both a warning and a promise. Flee from pride and stand firm in your dependence on God. In doing so, you will walk in ways of life, abundance, and peace. Thank you for watching until now, and do not forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell for more content like this, along with stories of triumph and motivation. Until next time.